Bones have fascinated humanity for centuries. Many cultures believe they hold spiritual powers, linking the living and the dead, the past and the future. Have you ever thought about the significance of bones in history, religions, or even politics? Today, I'm asking what they can reveal about colonial society and history. Why have people cherished or venerated bones? Why would bones be at the center of conflicts or important matters? I am Hélène Dupraz Sancho, a PhD student in art history at the Walter Benjamin College and the Institute of Art History at the University of Bern. You're listening to the first podcast from the SNSF research project, Global Bones. There's a certain tension in the air, vibrant colors. We are in Mexico City, 1578, in the midst of All Saints' Day celebration. For 8 days, the city will be buzzing with excitement. People preparing themselves for weeks. The streets are crowded. The event promises to be spectacular. Triumphal arches line the way. Lively pictures, fragrant flowers, bright fabrics, and even portraits. The whole city seems to have gathered. Everyone is wearing their best clothes. Dancers and musicians, shimmering feathers and jewels, golden and silver containers tower above the crowd. Inside these boxes are bones, and not just any bones. They are relics, sacred remains of saints from early Christianity. Believers venerate them deeply. The Roman Catholic Church has been a huge promoter of this cult. Alberto Saviello, from our research team, knows more about this.
The procession was held on 1st November, All Saints' Day, and it marked the arrival of 215 relics that had been sent from Rome. And it was the kickoff event of an 8-day festival that included church services in honor of the saints, but also dancing, poetry contests, plays, sports competitions, and others. I think the goal was to demonstrate that little more than 50 years after the destruction of Tenochtitlan by the Spanish, Mexico had developed into a major Christian center in the Americas.
Tenochtitlan is the old name of Mexico City and was the capital of Aztec Empire before becoming the capital of what was called New Spain. It was the center of politics, religion, arts, and commerce for this part of the world before and after the arrival of the Spaniards. Alberto Saviello dedicated part of his research on this big event that took place in Mexico City. He explains why this event is so important and what it meant in a newly conquered city with bones that mattered.
The message was that with the relics, many Christian saints were now arriving in the city, and it was meant to reach as many people as possible. Lists of the relics were printed and read aloud publicly in the city and in the surroundings. Almost all the political and clerical elite of New Spain was present at the event, and the festival was also aimed at the indigenous population. Locals performed songs in Nahuatl, for example, and traditional dances.
Tetikmatike muhtoa tortilla in Nahuatl, Tlaxcal.
Nahuatl was the most common language of the Aztec Empire. A great amount of this huge empire was able to speak it or understand it. It is the language that gave some of the newest words to Spanish from America in the 16th century, like you will recognize even in English, like chocolatl or coyotl. Today, modern Nahuatl is one of the 68 recognized indigenous languages of Mexico. Over 1.7 million people in Mexico speak it. Now we understand that the celebration gave on purpose the message of a Christianity that had absorbed and taken over the cultures of pre-Hispanic populations. Displaying the relics was more than a devotional act. It was a show of power. Catholic symbols paraded through a conquered capital, asserting a new religious and political order. The relics of the Christians came to inhabit the city, conquering the realm of the dead and imposing a new relation to the bones and their sacred meanings.
Si quieres conocer el infierno, sigue viviendo en el pecado, sigue viviendo en la maldad, sigue viviendo en la borrachera y conocerás el infierno cuando mueras.
Our research group investigates how human remains function socially, politically and spiritually, especially through material and visual culture. The encounters between the colonizers and the local cultures had both local and global impacts. Their legacies still shape our world and arts today. We aim to explore sacred relics and human remains in colonial context through the lens of art history. We focus on the early modern Spanish and Portuguese empires and their encounters with indigenous and local cultures, whether in India, in the Philippines, in Western Central Africa, or in the Americas. The indigenous understanding of bones and the world often deferred deeply to the colonizers. Alberto Saviello comments on the importance of this research project.
Honoring the remains of the dead is by no means unique to Christianity. Many of the people the missionaries met in their overseas missions were used to venerate their ancestors and the remains. So the quest of the missionaries was to substitute the ancestor relics with the relics of their own saints. And during these processes, oftentimes the tradition changed and mixed up or even conflicted.
Bones had their own agency, or people gave them deep transcendental meanings. The missionaries were aware of it, and sometimes tried to transform them, starting with what was in common, so that Catholicism would take over slowly. In other circumstances, the missionaries simply destroyed the other's culture, arguing that it was demonic. The Catholics also brought their bones for themselves, as they meant protection and connection to the god and saints. The Catholic bones also represented a bond to a long tradition and to European homelands, as Alberto Saviello explains.
So the bones are in a way essential to the memory of a tradition and of a culture, especially for the missionaries who worked far from home. Relics were a link to the heroic Christian past.
In other words, this celebration also served directly the Christian Europeans that had installed in Mexico. The bones integrated the new lands into the Christian world in a deeper way, and probably allowed the receptors of the bones to feel that Rome and the kings cared about them.
There are many interesting cases where relics played an important role in the interactions of missionaries and local people. For example, a case that has already been studied of the Tupinamba in today Brazil, where the locals kept the bones of a Jesuit missionary whom they regarded as their own shaman and a kind of non-Christian saint, and the Jesuits tried to get these bones back to their church and burial places. And these are the conflicts and interchanges between different religious traditions we are facing and analyzing.
This is a very interesting example of a context in which different meanings clashed around the same human bones, with two groups insisting to be able to keep and use the bones on their own rituals. The Tupinambas and the Jesuits wanted the bones for different reasons and to give them different treatments. And Alberto Saviello is convinced to study these relics in art history is of great importance.
The relics in themselves, for example, human bone, has a little capacity to speak. So they the relics need some other media to express their importance and their role in the practices of the religious people. And therefore they need like splendid reliquaries made of gold, shiny materials, but also like processions where they interact with people dancing and making music. And so the relics are surrounded by very different media. And as art historians, we are specialists to analyze this media. And we are looking for the different ways relics were framed and how different traditions expressed the importance of relics.
For centuries, Catholicism fused spiritual authority with political control, and visual representations were an effective tool for that. Bones and sacred artifacts blurred the line between devotion and domination. The colonizers recklessly suppressed other worldviews and representations. They erased traditions, beliefs, and even identities. Indigenous peoples were forced to adapt to survive to the new systems. Bones carry powerful meanings across cultures. They represent power, memory, identity, and belonging. They take part in rituals, arts, politics, and spirituality. They are preserved, honored, hidden, or even stolen. Now and then, possessing bones corresponds to control their meaning. And to study the significance of bones in close details deepens understanding and enriches nowadays debates and science. This was the first podcast of the Global Bone Project. If you want to learn more, check out our blog and website. My name is Hélène Dupraz Sancho. Thanks for listening and stay tuned!